Hello everyone, Brother Al McLean with this week's stewardship video. Before we get too far, let's go ahead and read the disclaimer. No advice should be seen as a recommendation, as I am not a licensed financial advisor, and this is for educational purposes only. So we're about to get into spring, and the exact date of spring is March 20th. How do I know that? That's the same day that my wife chose for our wedding day. And I can always remember that March 20th is the first day of spring, and that's one of the reasons why she chose it. So as we're getting into spring, some of you have already started your spring cleaning process. And I know that because I can look on the curves in my neighborhood and see everyone starting to put all these things on the curb for garbage pickup. You can see people starting to have renovators and cleaning services coming in to get ready for that spring cleanup. I looked at it this way. It's not only spring cleanup from a physical standpoint at your house, but looking at your finances, taking a good look of your budget specifically. What are some things that are in there that you may need to pare down or may need to increase as we go into further into 2022? So that's what I looked at from a spring cleanup. And what prompted me also was a scripture from Hebrews 12 verses 1 and 2 in the Amplified. And the specific part of the verse that I want to emphasize, it talks about we're surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, stripping off every unnecessary weight and the sin which so easily and cleverly entangles us, lets us run with endurance and active persistence the race that is set before us, looking away from all that will distract us and focusing our eyes on Jesus, who's the author and perfecter of our faith, the first incentive for our belief and the one who brings our faith to maturity. Now, I'm big on making sure that you read scripture in context, and I always point that out to you, but we also know from my mentor, Brother Harold Herring, he talks about scripture has parallel truths. So sometimes you can look at a scripture that not only has a health emphasis, but you can pull out a financial principle in that. Like Luke is a good example where it talks about counting the cost. Well, it's using a financial principle in that Jesus is talking about count the cost, lest someone not have enough money to finish what they're building. But it's talking about the cost of being a disciple. But we know there's a great financial principle in there. Same thing here. I'm seeing a financial principle where it talks about we're running our race, the purpose that God has set before us in his kingdom. He's also talking about our walk as disciples and staying away from things that entangle us and easily pull us down in the act of sin. But that's also a principle that you can use when looking at your budget and your lifestyle. What type of things are entangling you? What type of unnecessary expenses that you are carrying? So looking careful. But let me give you a scripture that more, you may say, more closely aligns. Proverbs 27 and 23 in the Amplified Bible says, be diligent to know the condition of your flocks and pay attention to your herds. Now, none of us, I don't think, are goat herders or shepherds out there. So there's a biblical principle, and that's, you see I have a picture of sheep at the bottom equals money. So we're equating this to money in our times. Look at the Message Bible translation. It says, know your sheep by name. Carefully attend to your flocks. Don't take them for granted. Possessions don't last forever. And then when the crops are in and the harvest is stored in the barns, you can knit sweaters from lambs, wool, sell your goats for a profit. There will be plenty of milk and meat to last for your family through the winter. So your greatest wealth building tool is your income. The best tool to manage that income is a spending plan or budget. I like to say spending plan, in other words, a budget, knowing each place your dollar is going. So that brings us to the principle of zero-based budgeting. And I've got a great video that was put together by the Ramsey Group, very short video that talks about this principle of zero-based budgeting.
Action! What is a zero-based budget? Well, let's define a budget first.
Your average budget is a monthly estimate of income and expenses with a list of categories. In other words, it's just a plan for your money. At Ramsey Solutions, we recommend taking it one step further with a zero-based budget.
The idea here is simple. The money that comes in minus the money that goes out equals zero, meaning you've told every penny exactly where it's gonna go. Just like how you told that guy in traffic exactly where he was gonna go. Now, making a zero-based budget isn't as hard as it sounds. Step 1, list your take-home pay for the month. Step 2, list all your expenses for the month, but start with these 5 categories: food, shelter, utilities, transportation, and clothing. The basics. You want to make sure your rent or mortgage is budgeted first before you start budgeting for something like your hot yoga membership. Jeff. Once the necessities are taken care of, move to step 3. List the rest of your expenses like haircuts, Netflix, date nights, plus all the stuff your kids need. Man, are kids really that expensive?
Yep.
Golly.
Don't let life catch you off guard. Think ahead and plan for events or situations you need to save up for. Holidays, weddings, birthdays, bar mitzvahs, quinceañeras, chupacabras, you name it. You can even create a fund in your budget to put aside money every month so you're ready when that day comes. Christmas is on December 25th. Again. Don't act surprised, people.
Now, if you work through every expense for the month and you still have $100 left, you haven't finished your budget quite yet. You've got to get Uncle Ben a job.
Put it towards your debt, for example, or maybe buy something that can help you figure this money stuff out.
Can't think of anything off the top of my head that could do that.
But I can't do a budget because I'm bad at math. Well, lucky for you, there's an app for everything. There's like 5 of them just for finding the nearest bathroom. That's not a joke. Look it up.
Get on your smartphone and download our free budgeting tool, EveryDollar, because no matter your end game, paying your way through college, getting out of debt, buying your first home, or even planning for retirement, your budget is the key to keeping it 100.
And now you know.
Okay, that's a great video that breaks it down in about 2 or 3 minutes of what the concept of zero-based budgeting is. And once again, let me put the disclaimer, I'm not trying to sell you on Financial Peace University, but it is a great course to take. There's other financial courses out there as well as apps that you could utilize to help you budget. EveryDollar is the one he mentioned. There's a free version of that. And then there's a premium version where you can download from the bank, but there's Mint. There's You Need a Budget, or YNAB. There are mobile apps, I think from the standpoint of Microsoft may have one, but I do know they have a computer-based or laptop. The point is, utilize what you're comfortable with. There's also just an Excel spreadsheet, or just get pen and paper to put together. The main principle that you need to remember is, as he was saying, you want to budget to zero, which means you get down to zero. If you have an amount that's over or surplus, budget that also. If you are over, then of course you need to go back and start making adjustments so it's zero. So a lot of people say, well, I want to have that margin of $100. What Dave Ramsey used to say is that if you don't give every dollar a job to do, it'll become an independent contractor and find its own thing to do. So that's why we need to be taking control of. And I also forgot one other course you can do through Crown Financial or Compass. And then there's Joe Sangel we've had at our church, which was I Was Broke, Now I'm Not. So there's a lot of different reasonably priced, and some are even free, that you can go and utilize. So let's go ahead, transition over. Start going and looking at the market. We are into the week of March 7th, and their reporting earnings include companies such as Dick's Sporting Goods. It's out here. We've got Campbell's Soup, Thor, which is recreational vehicles. That took a spike up because a lot of people during COVID were purchasing or renting those vehicles. CrowdStrike. That's from a standpoint of maybe cyber play. And we're going to talk about cyber play. DocuSign. So not as prominent companies as we've seen because we're starting to wind down on earnings season. The heavy hitters tend to be earlier. Petco could be interesting because that industry is blowing up with people with pets. And then Ulta in the past has been a very steady, could be used as a defensive stock because even during more harder times, people still want the products. So we'll see next week. I don't think it'll have as much an impact as we've seen before because these are not as I call heavy hitter companies reporting out this week. To continue the theme along Ukraine and Russia, last week's video, if you didn't get a chance to look at it, we talked a lot about the effects of Ukraine and Russia and the war that's occurring there. Cyber has become an area that you may want to look at. Again, this is not meant as a recommendation, but something that's to pique your interest when it comes to doing your own research. So I went to, and you know, one of my favorite websites, ETFDB. That's etfdb.com, where you can go look at an ETF, and you may want to go with the ETF. And both of these ETFs, Hack and Cyber, CIBR, are about $55, $50, $57 range. But if that's even a little high for what you want to spend, you can kind of create your own exchange traded fund. I went out and looked for these using stock slices, Charles Schwab. Remember, there's other ways you can do it also through Fidelity. They have fractional shares. Well, stock slices with Charles Schwab, I was able to find Cisco, and that's in both of these ETFs. I was able to find Fortinet, that's in both of these. Juniper is in both of these. Accenture, I think, is in one of these. It's over here under Cyber. And then I was also able, I think those were the four that I was able to find. So you could, with using Charles Schwab, as little as $5, I think. It's either $5 or $10, I'm forgetting, but it's much smaller. You can kind of create your own exchange traded fund. So another thing that gives you flexibility. But I mean, take a look at the area of cyber, because everyone's getting a little nervous about what Russia may do when it comes to cyber attacks. Last thing we'll do, look at the overall market. We've seen that downtrend continue. A lot of uncertainty in the market, not necessarily Ukraine and Russia, because that's happened. So that's certain. But it's, what is the Fed going to do? That creates uncertainty. Once the market figures out, okay, it may be a disastrous type thing like the war, but once it's happened, so there's no uncertainty anymore. It's now certain. Now it's, what's the Fed going to do? So that may be kind of causing a reaction by the market, but we know downtrend is still continuing. Now it went through a couple of the levels of support, and this is QQQ. Here's the next level here around $330, and this is for the exchange traded fund QQQ, which would be representative I'm using as like the NASDAQ. Here's SPY, same thing. It's been bouncing off of the support that's sitting around 430 kind of area, 429, maybe that's where that is. Been bouncing around. If it goes through this area, the next one is all the way down here by probably 411, 410. So that's SPY. So with that, I want to end with the recognition, and my wife pointed this out about, she said, did you know Dr. Arthurine Lucy Foster, who was the first Black student who was enrolled in University of Alabama? And you know, that's my alma mater. And she died this past Wednesday at the age of 92. So she paved the way so I could go to University of Alabama. And if you've not heard of, I've got a short video that I'll end with. So Dr. Arthurine Lucy Foster, at age 92, passed away. They are naming the College of Education building after her. It's going to be the Arthurine Lucy Hall in her honor. And I'll end with this video, but before we go, as always, go out to YouTube, do a search under my name, Al McClaney, hit the thumbs up buttons, like and subscribe, and you can set up notifications. You can also go to email St. John, which is my church, but you don't have to be a member of St. John, but you can get on the distribution list, and every week around either Wednesday or Thursday that has the announcements, it includes the latest stewardship video. So let's go ahead and end with this. And as we always say, have a great week. And my Pastor Davis always said, remember to keep a good spirit. And what do we say on the stewardship video? Remember, Jesus is Lord, therefore he is the owner, but we're his faithful students. And we'll see you next week. And we'll end with a video that's highlighting Dr. Autherine Lucy Foster.
In Alabama, legends often have humble beginnings. The same can be said of Autherine Lucy Foster. Born on a small farm in Shiloh, Alabama, Autherine was a dedicated student, graduating from Linden Academy before receiving a teaching certificate from Selma University and a bachelor's degree from Miles College in 1952. Seeking the best possible education in the state, Lucy decided to apply to graduate school at the University of Alabama, despite the fact that the UA campus remained segregated at the time. On September 13, 1952, Autherine was notified she had been accepted to the graduate school at UA. However, when school officials discovered she was not white, they quickly rescinded her application pursuant to state law and denied her admittance.
I don't think that she should come down here because well, my mother and my father and generations before that have always been taught the colored and the white is a definite dividing line.
Integration is inevitable. However, the South isn't ready for that step, and I feel that that time should be decided by the South, and it is their decision to take.
Backed by the NAACP, Lucy charged the university with racial discrimination in a court case that took nearly 3 years to resolve. In June of 1955, the U.S. District Court ruled in favor of Lucy, making her the first African-American student to be enrolled at the University of Alabama. Her initial days on campus were largely uneventful, but that would quickly change when riots broke out in protest of her admittance. Ushered by university officials, she hastily made her way through the crowd of protesters who hurled racially charged threats and debris as she passed. That evening, the University Board of Trustees voted to suspend Lucy from the university, ultimately expelling her, citing charges of defamation.
What brought about these actions, I feel, is that lawless elements outside the campus set themselves over and above the law. Their actions brought great discredit to our nation.
Disheartened by the news, Lucy left Alabama and moved to Texas, where she worked as a school teacher, married, and started her own family. For 30 years later, in 1988, Lucy received a letter from the University of Alabama informing her that her expulsion had been annulled. The following semester, she joined her daughter, Grazia, as a student at UA, enrolling in the master's program for elementary education. 4 years later, she crossed the commencement stage to a standing ovation as a graduate of the University of Alabama. In the time since, Autherine Lucy Foster has been honored for her valiant role in desegregating the University of Alabama. An endowed scholarship was created in her name. The Autherine Lucy Clock Tower stands prominently in Malone Hood Plaza, and a historical marker stands in front of the building where she attended her first classes on campus.
If you don't know your history, you will forget your past, won't you? I wanted to shed brownie tears because I never thought that anything like that would happen to a lady named Autherine Lucy. I will not fear. What can man do unto me? He can take this body, but he can't take my soul.
In 2019, she once again made her way across the commencement stage to a standing ovation, receiving an honorary doctorate in human letters.
Today, in recognition of her extraordinary bravery, perseverance, and the significant impact that she's had on the lives of others, it is an honor to present Ms. Autherine Lucy Foster with an honorary degree from the University of Alabama.
Her initiative and courage won the right for students of all races to attend the University of Alabama, but her impact reaches far beyond the borders of the state. Her noble sense of justice fostered change throughout American society, influencing positive transformation across our state and nation.
As we rode across the campus today, I said, gee whiz, this is a blessing in disguise to see this university permitting me to come on here and be involved in whatever they are doing today. Anything that the university does, I glory in its mercy. That's a wonderful campus out there, and I know it, and everybody in the country must know it.